This is by far one of the most highly requested videos on my channel, so today I'm going to break down my entire color pencil drawing process. So grab your own supplies and let's go. Hey people, it's Temi if you're new here, and you already know color pencils are my faves and I love giving you tips and tricks to help with your own portraits, and that's exactly what I'm doing today. In fact, I'm breaking down my entire process, so going from the sketch to how you even find the right colors to pick for the portrait, the underpainting layer, and then the details. I'm sure you get tons of tips, but this is actually a snippet from my full Skillshare course, and I go into this in so much more depth. By the way, this video is not sponsored by Skillshare, but I'll leave my referral link down below and you can take my course for free. So make sure you take advantage of that. But for this condensed video, let's get straight to it. Here are the supplies I'll be using. I have them all linked down below, by the way. Starting with the coloring pencils, I'm using my trusted Prismacolors. The sketchbook I'm using is from Arteza, it's the Arteza Mixed Media Pad. And for my marker base, I'm using Arteza Everblend markers. I don't use them enough on my channel, but they definitely deserve their flowers. Such a beautiful selection of colors, especially the deeper tones. The first thing you need to do is to find a good photo reference. You can find one on Google, Instagram, Pinterest, or even some royalty-free sites like Unsplash. I'll leave a link to my Pinterest board where I've added a bunch of references if you need a starting point. Or you could just take your own picture. I'll be using my own in this tutorial. We're going to start by creating an accurate sketch. It is by far the most important thing to consider for realism, because you can have great rendering, but if the sketch is off, then it's never going to look realistic. There are many methods to do this, but today I'll show you using the grid method. And this is when you draw grid lines on your reference and on your sketch paper, and you transfer what you can see square by square. I like to add my grid lines digitally to save time. I did this one in Photoshop, and because I sketch on a separate bit of paper outside of my sketchbook, I also print a blank page of just the grid lines and we can just get straight on with the sketching. You want to number the picture and your sketching sheet. I've gone for letters across the top and numbers vertically downwards. And it really is just as simple as it sounds. Look at where things fall in each square, particularly at the intersection of some lines, and use it as a guide to copy the main shapes you can see. Don't worry if it's looking a bit crazy. Remember, this is just the line work. When you add color with all of the shadowing and stuff, it will really come together. So just trust the process. Start with the main big shapes that you can see, like the shape of the face, the jaw, the features like the eyes, the nose, the lips, and then go in with the smaller details. But there really is no point trying to capture every single detail, like every single eyelash or hair strand. Nobody has that energy. And when you're done with the sketch, if you did it on a separate sheet like me, it's time to transfer it into your sketchbook. I'll be using a graphite transfer sheet, but if you don't have one, feel free to shade the back of your paper with a soft graphite pencil and just outline all the lines you can see. Find it easier to outline it in a different color so that I can easily see where I've already traced. And now we've got our sketch all transferred, it's time to do the underpainting layer. I'm going to use markers for the underpainting. I include this step because it gives me a good base before I go in with my coloring pencils. But the first thing I do before I start coloring in is to map out the colors I can see. I refer to the swatches of my markers, and I'm just trying to identify the colors that I can see in the photo reference so that I can use the right colors in my piece. People tend to find color matching portraits very difficult, and this is a great exercise that can kind of ease you into the whole thing, so you don't need to feel like you're being thrown in the deep end. So I'm looking at my reference and my swatch sheet and just writing the color names on the different parts of the face. All you need to think about at this point are the main base colors you can identify. Remember, the colors don't have to be exact, you just want a good starting point. You can end up changing the tone of the color with your coloring pencils later. By the way, I'm doing this on the paper sketch and not in my sketchbook. And now we have all of our colors mapped out, it's time to start on our portrait. This might feel nerve-wracking, but you've got this. This step is probably one of the simplest. It really is just like coloring in a coloring book. You're just coloring along the lines that you've already drawn. Also, if you feel like you've made a massive mistake at any point of this coloring process, you know, those big mistakes that you feel like you cannot come back from, you can always retransfer your sketch to another page and try again. The Arteza marker I'm using has a chisel tip, And you see that a chisel tip versus a brush tip doesn't really matter. A brush tip might make it easier to blend, but I'm not focusing too much on the blend. I'm actually trying to gradually build towards the darker colors. When you layer the same darker color over itself, it gradually darkens, so it ends up creating a natural blend. I'm just using my color map sheet to help me, and I've got my swatch sheet in front of me, and I'm just trying to place the colors where I see fit. Color and pencil drawing is such a patient sport, and if you're new to it, that is something to keep in mind. That's actually one of the reasons why I use a marker base, because a marker base actually speeds up the process. But just know that this isn't the kind of thing that you can rush, so really take your time and you've got this. The last thing I'm doing is adding the darkest values such as the eyebrows and the eyeliner, and we can move on to the color pencil details. This is definitely the most exciting part for me because this is where the piece really comes together and the likeness materializes. The first and most important thing to do is to make sure your pencils are sharp. This helps you so much more than you could imagine. It really helps you to create beautiful seamless blends. By the way, if you're new to blending, I have tons of videos about it on my channel. I'll link one up in the cards, and that can help you with a starting point. I'm starting with the eyes in this piece, and if you're a regular subscriber, you already know I love starting with the eyes. And this is because I feel like when the eyes come out looking great, it really helps to capture likeness because you're looking into the portrait's eyes. With the eyes, you want to think about the reflections in the pupil that you can see in the reference picture. I'm starting by using a white pencil for this. I might go in later with a white pen. It might help to focus on different parts of the drawing at a time so you don't feel overwhelmed by the whole piece. So starting with the eyes, you can try to get that together, get that to a good point, and then you can move on to the nose, then you can move on to the lips, or whatever order you want to do the portrait in. The main goal for the skin is to produce a beautiful seamless blend. And since the markers are giving us nice even midtones, with the color and pencils we can go straight in to add the highlights and then some of the deeper shadows, which will give us the perfect amount of contrast we need for the piece. I'm starting by using a light color in pencil just to mark out the main highlighted areas like the bridge of the nose, the cheeks, the forehead, the chin. Basically, if you're into makeup, it's just the main places that you would normally highlight. Now it's looking a little bit crazy, but it's all good because the next step is then to blend out the edges so that we have somewhat of a smooth transition from the main highlighted areas that we did in pencils to the midtone that we have with the markers. I'm not going to go into specific colors I'm using because it's not that important, except you're literally following this tutorial exactly, doing a portrait of me, which of course is fine. Feel free to share that with me on Instagram. But for the majority of you that will be doing a different person in your portrait, you need to focus on your actual reference picture to identify the colors that you see in the reference. So if it will help you, do the same mapping exercise we did earlier with the markers with your pencils and try to identify the highlight colors you see, the midtone colors, the shadow colors. Try to really think outside the box. Don't only use whites for highlights and black for shadows. Try using other lighter colors for highlights. Try using purples for shadows. Try to bring in those reds, the burgundies. Bringing in the deep blue if you're drawing dark skin as well. I'm sure you can see the purple that I have under the creases in the eyes, and it might be looking a little bit crazy, but the reality is when it's layered and blended over brown skin, it just ends up bringing the perfect amount of depth. You might also notice I've used a lot of burgundy and it just layers seamlessly. If you saw my cheap versus expensive portrait with the Crayola Colors of the World set and the Prismacolor portrait pencils, you would have seen that it was very clear to see the difference when you have these extra supplementary colors for depth. I think I need to do a dedicated video on how to identify these other colors. But when you're happy with the blend, we're going to go in with the final details like the eyelashes. And look at this piece, it's just beautifully come together. The last thing that really helps with the detail is the white pen. If you've got sharp highlight points in your reference picture, this is going to be amazing because it just gives you the real 3D pop of shine. And once the face is done, the finish line is in sight. Honestly, the rest of the piece just comes together. The main hair technique that I do is to cover the base with the mid-tone marker color. So here I'm using a dark brown. And then going in with the highlights, I'm using a white pencil, and for shadows, I'm using a black pencil. And I'm just going back and forth, blending with the pencils, blending with markers, and just trying to make hair-like strands. It is impossible to capture every single strand of hair, so don't bother. Just try to follow the overall flow of the hair and make sure that the highlights and your shadows are really well defined. The texture of hair you're drawing really depends on how easy this step is for you. I'm yet to make a full hair tutorial, and before I do, I have other videos on my channel, including some in the Professional Artist Colouring Book series that shows me colouring different hair textures and hair colours. I'll link the playlist up in the cards. And for the rest of the piece is the exact same marker based technique and then coloring pencil details. And just look at the chest area come together. It just came out so vibrant, so beautiful, so smooth. I'm here for it. Generally, I don't love drawing clothes, and by this part of the portrait, I am ready to give up. I'm ready to move on to the next one. So the easiest method I found for that is just to mostly use markers. Use coloring pencils for some of the details, but markers to map the main shapes. I'm not trying to get it looking exact. This is not hyperrealism. We're not here for every single thread in the top. We're just trying to make it look like the top makes sense. So that is just a taster to my full Skillshare course that I mentioned earlier. You can take the entire course for free with my referral link in the description box, so hope to see you there. I show how I pick colors for different skin tones, even down to the basics of color and pencil blending. Signing up through my link supports me and my channel, so thank you in advance, and I'll see you on the next one. Goodbye.